back, everybody. Let's put another log on the soul fire, because you are locked into Max and Mello's Architects of Soul. I'm Max Soul, sitting across from my brother, partner in crime, and lead vocals for Soul and the New Vibe, the one, the only, Mr. Mello Soul.
What's up, world? Good to be back in the studio with you, Max.
Always good to be with you, Mello.
Yeah, today we're stepping into the wild, high-octane world of a man who didn't just push the boundaries of R&B, he blew them up.
He blew them up real good.
Oh, yeah, no, he blew them up with heavy synth bass, rock aggression, and pure street poetry. We're talking about the king of punk funk himself, James Ambrose Johnson Jr., better known to the world as Rick James.
Oh, yeah, Mello. Rick James was an absolute powerhouse. But before he was selling out arenas in thigh-high boots and beaded braids, his story started on the tough east side of Buffalo, New York, where his mother ran numbers for a local crime family. And she was doing this to make ends meet after their father left. So Rick grew up immersed in the grit, street corner singing, and the nightclub culture of the city early on.
That's the truth, y'all. That duality of street survival and high musical art shaped his entire trajectory.
It surely did.
And around 1964, when he was just 14 or 15 years old, Rick was constantly getting into trouble in Buffalo.
You know, you could see that.
And he faced the looming threat of the draft, as all young men did back then.
That's true. So Rick James, who was still James Johnson Jr. at the time, and thinking that he was smart, and he definitely thought he was smart, he's decided to preemptively avoid being drafted directly into active front life service. So what he did, he lied about his age and enlisted in the U.S. Naval Reserve. Now, he's just 16 years old, and his plan is to fulfill his military obligation by simply attending weekend reserve drills while pursuing music. I don't think so. No, sorry.
Right, Max.
No.
Great idea in theory, but however, in practice...
No, not really. So after skipping several mandatory reserve sessions, including missing drills on the USS Enterprise, and I got to think that might have been a problem. Well, the Navy had a different plan for him then. So they classified him as AWOL and issued orders for assigning him to active duty in Vietnam. Well, that definitely wouldn't do.
No, so Rick James, soon to be Rick James, goes AWOL from the U.S. Naval Reserve, and he flees across the border to Toronto. Now, it's 1964 into 65, and this move kicks off one hell of an amazing ride.
Oh, it surely does. So understand, Soul Fam, when 16-year-old Rick James, then James Johnson Jr., fled Buffalo for Toronto after going AWOL from the Navy Reserve, he arrived with like no money and no real connections. Wow. And now in Toronto in the mid-1960s, particularly the Yonge Street and Yorkville Strip, it was becoming a haven for American draft dodgers, musicians, and hippies. And guess where we think he shows up?
Right there.
Right on Yonge Street and on the Strip in Yorkville. Yep. However, that also meant there was a growing friction between the local street crowds, the conservative Canadians, and all these incoming Americans. And then, well, you toss in a little racial tension.
All right, and all this backdrop to the young, broke 16-year-old.
With the big mouth.
Yeah, so one night while hanging around outside a venue on Yonge Street, Rick gets approached by three drunk men. The men began harassing him, partly because he stood out as an outsider and an American, but primarily because of a bitter racial provocation. The men yelled racial slurs directly at him.
And our soon-to-be Rick James, well, he's never one to back down or hold his tongue. And even as a teenager surrounded on the street, well, he shouted back and he stood his ground.
Well, y'all, naturally the situation immediately escalated into a physical altercation.
You think?
And the three men jumped Rick right there on the sidewalk. And because it was just him, he was heavily outnumbered. And so he was taking a severe beating while being pinned down against the pavement.
Yeah, and God bless the music world, especially in the 60s and 70s, and especially fortuitously for Rick. Levon Helm and Garth Hudson, who, if you don't know, played in a group called The Band, who played behind Bob Dylan soon after all of this. But at the time, they were playing nightly in Toronto as part of Ronnie Hawkins' legendary backup group, The Hawks. Well, these two musicians were walking down Yonge Street heading toward their own gig. And Mello, seeing three grown men gang up on a young teenager on the sidewalk, well, ain't no way. Levon and Garth, they didn't hesitate. They sprinted over, waded into the melee, and physically pulled the attackers off of Rick, and sending those three drunk assholes running off into the night.
When they saw how bloodied and shaken up Rick was, Max, Levon and Garth dusted him off, took him to a nearby venue, and invited him to sing on stage with them. That single street fight transformed Rick overnight from a vulnerable, fleeing teenager into an accepted member of Toronto's vibrant music community.
You think he might have had an easier way getting into it, but
you think so.
But just think about the connection here. Levon and Garth took this shaken-up teenager into a nearby venue, invited him on stage, and they let him sing. And you know what happened, don't you? Fucking James Johnson Jr., soon to be changing his name to Rick James, literally blew the room away.
And now he's part of the scene, Max.
He was a big-time part of the scene.
Oh, yeah, and to hide from the U.S. military, local Canadian singer Shirley Matthews, remember that name?
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Suggested he adopt the stage name Ricky James Matthews, which eventually became Rick James.
He said, baby, why don't you take my last name?
Exactly.
And that Toronto rescue launched a massive domino effect. So Rick integrated himself in Toronto's Yorkville folk rock scene. That had to be some sight to see. So he formed a band called the Mynah Birds, named after a local coffee house owned by an eccentric businessman named John Craig Eaton, who actually bought them gear, which back in the day, that was the key. Hey, man, we'll name our band, right? We'll name our band after you. Can you buy us some gear? And the sound, y'all, the lineup was fluid, but things shifted into overdrive when Rick brought in future Buffalo Springfield bassist Bruce Palmer and a quiet, intense Canadian guitarist who drove around in a secondhand Pontiac hearse named Pocahontas. And his name was Neil Young.
Well, the visual contrast was out of control.
I can only imagine.
Right. On the stage, the group was electric.
It's insane.
You had Rick James, this charismatic, dancing, doing backflips and crooning R&B, paired with Neil Young, who wore a fringed jacket, trading blistering 12-string guitar riffs and played wild, feedback-heavy solos.
It's so crazy.
And the sound, y'all, these boys were playing a hybrid of bird-style folk rock, heavy rolling R&B, and garage punk.
Oh, they truly were, Mel. The band was making so much noise in Canada that they caught the attention of Morley Shellman, a Toronto music insider with ties to Motown. Now, Shellman helped secure an audition for the band in Detroit. And Barry's involved. Here we go. In early 1966, Rick, Neil Young, Bruce Palmer, drummer Rickman Mason, and rhythm guitarist John Taylor, they crammed their asses into a car and drove straight to Hitsville, USA.
Now, Barry Gordy and Motown head of A&R William Mickey Stevenson were blown away by the band's energy.
Yeah, they were supposedly absolutely out of control.
And they signed the Mynah Birds to Motown's VIP imprint, making them the first predominantly white/interracial rock group signed to Motown.
And that's a big thing.
Oh, yeah.
Back then, you did not have interracial bands that anybody even talked about. And there were plenty of bands, like the Allman Brothers were interracial. But this was beyond anything that anybody saw in the 60s. So Soul Fam, they recorded a single titled It's My Time, and Neil and Rick wrote it together.
I would love to hear that.
Yeah, I would absolutely kill to hear it. Yeah. Along with another song called Go On and Cry. And Smokey Robinson, he also took a personal interest in Rick's vocal tracks. He coached him on phrasing and mic control. So just as Motown was prepping It's My Time for radio release and pressing advance copies, the entire operation blew up overnight due to a financial betrayal. Motown gave the band's manager, Morley Shellman, a substantial cash advance to buy equipment and keep the band floating. I'll bet it's floating, but not the band, right? So Shellman allegedly blows the advance money on his personal drug habit. And so Rick confronts him about the missing money. And the argument, it fucking turns vicious, of course. So Shellman goes straight to Motown and tells them that Ricky James Matthews is a deserter from the Navy. And, Barry, he ain't on no part of that.
No way, Max. Motown couldn't risk harboring a military fugitive.
No, I ain't gonna ruin my business.
Exactly. Label executives immediately shelved It's My Time, canceled the record release, and instructed Rick that he had to turn himself into the authorities to clean up his legal status if he ever wanted a career.
You can hear that. Rick, you gotta go down and go back to jail because I ain't letting you in my town.
So Rick
ruined my record company.
Well, then after that, Rick returned to the U.S. and surrendered to the Navy, serving nearly a year in a brig in Portsmouth, Virginia.
And on a side note, y'all, Neil Young and Bruce Palmer, they got stuck in Toronto with a shelved Motown contract and no lead singer. So desperate for a fresh start, Neil sold his gear, loaded Bruce into his famous 1953 Pontiac hearse, and drove illegally across the U.S. border to Los Angeles. So now they're driving on Sunset Boulevard. They end up sitting in traffic, and Steven Stills and Richie Fiore are in another car in the opposite lane, and they spot the hearse.
How about that?
It's unbelievable. They pull over together, they reunite, and form Buffalo Springfield right on the spot. Now, you think about this, Mel. If Morley Shellman hadn't ratted Rick out, It's My Time would have been released on Motown in 1966, potentially making Rick James and Neil Young national stars a decade earlier.
It would have changed everything.
It would have. Buffalo Springfield might never have existed, which meant that Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young's trajectory would have been completely, totally altered. And as for Rick's time in the Navy brig forced him to pivot to deep songwriting and studio arranging. And that laid the groundwork for his eventual return to Motown 12 years later to create punk funk.
Right, Max. Rick didn't waste that break time. He honed his songwriting and studied musical arrangements. And when he got out, he formed an interracial rock soul outfit in L.A. called Salt and Pepper.
He just can't help it. I love it.
His bassist in that group was Greg Reeves, who went straight from working with Rick to becoming the bassist for Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young.
The strings, Mellow, the strings.
On the Deja Vu album. Great album, by the way.
Oh, amazing record.
Plus, his keyboardist, Ed Roth, and the drummer, Kofi Hall from Mama Lion, brought a heavy, raw rock drive that Rick absorbed like a sponge.
And when Salt and Pepper folded, Rick and Ed Roth headed back to Toronto and formed Great White Cane. And that was merging a heavy horn section called Milestone in the band. And in Salt and Pepper, Rick learned how to fuse heavy LA psychedelic rock with black soul rhythms. And in Great White Cane, now he learned how to write for, arrange, and direct a full horn section alongside this rock instrumentation. So when he walked into Motown a few years later to build the Stone City Band, well, he took the exact blue-collar horn and guitar fusion he built with these guys and turned it into a multi-platinum punk funk. Rick realized that while black music had the absolute best rhythm sections in soul, they sure as shit did. White rock acts had the monopoly on theatrical aggression and raw spectacle. Well, he decided he wanted to merge those two universes. And that band, White Cane, was Rick's ultimate proving ground. It's where he learned how to write for, arrange, and direct a full live horn section alongside with those heavy rock guitars.
Then Rick spent time in London soaking up British glam and early punk. The leather, the platform boots, and that raw, rebellious attitude.
Now you know he must have loved that.
Oh, yeah. And then that's still, he sees that while black music had an absolutely, like you said, the best rhythm sections and the soul, white rocks had a monopoly on theatrical aggression and stage spectacle. So Rick is brewing something in his head. He asked himself, why can't black artists combine heavy synth bass and soul vocals with rock spectacle?
A good question, Rick, right?
Exactly.
The fusion became the exact blueprint for punk funk. And as for every independent R&B soul artist creating music today, the lesson from Rick's early journey is massive. Right? Your musical vocabulary shouldn't be limited to one genre. Learning how to stack horn arrangements, incorporate rock guitar energy, and build a unique visual identity is what turns a great recording artist into a true master of the craft.
That's right. Now stick around, Soul Family, because when we come back, we're diving into how Rick took all those lessons and turned them into multi-platinum gold at Motown with Teena Marie.
You're listening to Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Max and Mello's Architects of Soul. So, before we roll into this next chapter, if you like this content, please give a like and subscribe to our channel. And remember, there's also a video version available on our YouTube page if you feel like watching instead of just listening.
Also, if you have a minute, we would love it if you gave a listen to our music.
We sure would.
We at Soul of the New Vibe are on Apple, Amazon, and Spotify, as well as the lyric videos on our YouTube page. Now, Max, after soaking in the European rock spectacle...
Yeah, it was a spectacle.
Oh, yeah, it was.
I can only imagine Rick there.
the platform boots and the glam punk rebellion in London, and that was around 73, 74.
He's like, I like it here.
And then Rick knew he had the vision, but he needed a fresh starting line.
He did, Mello, indeed. Instead of waiting around for a record company to hand him a contract, well, Rick went back home to upstate New York around 1976, 1977. So he booked time at Cross-Eyed Bear Studios, which was a small studio in Clarence, New York, used by jazz fusion group Spyro Gyra. He scraped enough money together to self-fund a set of high-energy demo tracks. With his newly assembled crew, the early framework of the Stone City Band, while he recorded a raw versions of the tracks he'd been cooking up, including You and I and Mary Jane. So once he had those master tapes in his hand, Rick leveraged his family ties. Here's something you might not know, Soul Fam, because his uncle was Melvin Franklin, the legendary bass singer for the Temptations.
How about that?
Here you go, Mello. A new string go along with all the others that the show is showing us.
You always talk about the strings.
They're there. Melvin knew Rick was a wild character, but he also knew that his nephew was a musical genius. So Melvin took Rick's demo tape straight into the Motown offices in Los Angeles and handed it right to Iris Gordy, a top Motown executive and Berry Gordy's niece. Naturally.
Of course.
Naturally. So it's 1977, and Motown, man, they were at a serious creative and commercial crossroads. The classic 1960s Motown sound, well, it was fading, and the market was completely dominated by slick, repetitious disco. The label was losing its street edge and desperately needed an artist who could deliver heavy, authentic funk with modern crossover pop appeal.
Well, Iris Gordy popped Rick's tape into the deck and was instantly blown away by the raw power, heavy synth bass lines, and infectious hooks on You and I.
They probably had not heard anything like that before.
So then she took the tape straight to Berry Gordy. Berry recognized that Rick was no longer just the kid from the Mynah Birds who got ratted out to the Navy.
Right.
He was now a fully formed composer, arranger, and star. And here we go, y'all.
Here we go, yep.
Okay, Motown officially re-signed Rick in late 1977 to their Gordy imprint. So Rick returned to Motown and drops his solo debut record, Come and Get It. He had already assembled the Stone City Band, which was a powerhouse multiracial backing unit that gave his studio tracks an explosive, unquantized live drive. And so hits like You and I and Mary Jane hit radio like a freight train.
Oh, they sure did. But behind the scenes, Mello, we must mention here that there were two critical figures who helped Rick translate his wild ideas into radio hits. First was Sly Stone's influence. So Sly showed Rick that an R&B band could wear wild street clothes and rock out with distorted guitars and hold down a monster funk groove. During the early years when Rick was developing the punk funk concept, he had not met Sly yet, which we covered in Season 2, Episode 5, y'all. But Sly Stone was his ultimate artistic idol. So Rick James studied Sly's playbook like a textbook. The multiracial band, the synth integration, trading lead vocals, the rock guitar distortion, and the street fashion spectacle. Man, Rick, he walked into the record plant in Sausalito to record street songs in 1980, and he explicitly demanded the exact same recording room Sly used. The exact same chief engineer, Tom Fly, who worked on Sly's landmark album, There's a Riot Going On. Rick was deliberately chasing the ghost of Sly Stone's studio energy long before they ever shook hands.
And the second key and behind-the-scenes architect was Motown producer and engineer Art Stewart Max. Rick's energy was chaotic and unbridled.
He was.
He wanted heavy, distorted synth bass using the newly emerging Overheim and ARP synthesizers pushed right up to the front of the mix alongside heavy rock guitars.
So, Art Stewart acted as the bridge. He knew how to harness Rick's raw punk aggression while maintaining the pristine, radio-friendly, low-end clarity that Motown was famous for. Stewart co-produced Rick's album Come and Get It, ensuring that tracks like You and I, they hit with maximum punch. Art Stewart knew how to harness Rick's raw punk aggression while maintaining that pristine low-end clarity for radio. Plus, Motown executives Barry and Iris Gordy, they gave Rick the green light on their imprint label, realizing Motown really needed that street edge to combat disco because they were getting hammered.
Oh, yeah. And, of course, Max Barry is involved.
Oh, is he always not,
right? Motown didn't change. They were just trying to figure out how to make money. But Barry was still the boss.
Always.
So when Rick brought Mary Jane and You and I to Motown, the executives were initially hesitant. The songs were too long, too aggressive, and explicitly mentioned marijuana.
I told Norman that I ain't doing that stuff. I ain't bringing that stuff. It's talking marijuana.
Mary Jane?
Mary
Who
Jane.
is she?
Oh, my God. Can you imagine? Barry probably lost his shit. But he knew, right? He knew. Iris and Barry recognized that Motown was losing ground to the disco craze, and they needed something dangerous, fresh, and street-oriented. So they gave Rick total creative freedom on their Gordy imprint, forging a new hybrid. Because in the late 1970s, soul was seriously split between slick disco and hard funk. Rick saw an opportunity to bridge hard-edged rock energy, new wave synths, that heavy bass and street-smart lyrics, naming his signature style punk funk, and allowing his self-proclaimed punk funk manifesto to officially take over the airwaves in 1978, and take over it did.
Oh, it sure did. And as we said before, Soul Fam, the Stone City Band allowed Rick to assemble a powerhouse multiracial backing unit, tight horn sections, and heavy bass lines. They gave the studio tracks an explosive, unquantized live drive. The 1978 breakthrough Come and Get It, his debut solo record, dropping on Motown's Gordy imprint, birthing hits like You and I and Mary Jane, and it established him instantly as Motown's premier late 70s star.
Unbelievable. And by late 1978, Rick James was the hottest new commodity at Motown. Following Come and Get It, Berry Gordy and the Motown executive suite wanted to capitalize on his success by pairing him with the queen herself, Diana Ross.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, right? Rick was tasked with writing and producing a full album for Diana. I don't know.
Okay, y'all. So I don't know if you see an issue just ambling down the road headed to a wall.
Oh, yeah.
But I sure do. Right. So it goes without saying that, well, I'm going to say it anyway, the session dynamic wasn't clicking quite the way Barry hoped.
Not quite the way he was looking for.
No, because you would think he would realize that Diana was accustomed to a polished, traditional pop R&B production setup, while Rick was a loud, unbridled, leather-clad street funk tornado.
That man is uncouth, and I will not work with him. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, because I don't think that Rick was having a pretty good time either.
No.
Time to walk out of the room for a minute. While pacing the Motown hallways in Los Angeles, frustrated with the slow progress and trying to figure out what the fuck this was all about, Rick heard a jaw-dropping vocal echoing out of an open studio door. He's like, what the fuck is that? Shit, I got to go find out. So he goes and he sees who in the world that is that. Well, Rick looks into the room, and what does he see? He sees a young, white, unsigned artist named Mary Christine Brockert, who would become Teena Marie, sitting at a piano, singing her heart out. Well, Rick stopped dead in his tracks. He walked into the room, listening to her riffing on the keys, and immediately abandoned the Diana Ross project. He walked straight to Barry's office and said, I am not doing the Diana album. I am producing this girl.
I can just picture it, too.
I can, too.
And that brings us to one of the most legendary mentor-protege pairings in music history, Rick James and Teena Marie.
Fire and Desire.
Teena had been stuck in Motown's development pipeline for 2 years because the label didn't know how to market a white woman with a soul-drenched gospel voice. And, of course, Rick didn't care about the racial optics. He only heard the frequency, y'all. For her 1979 debut album, which Rick wrote and produced, Wild and Peaceful, Rick and Motown made an historic decision. They did not put Teena's face on the album cover, We talked about this in an earlier podcast.
That's right. Season 1, episode 5, y'all.
Two white girls on a beach.
That's right. A seascape painting, and they released her duet with Rick. I'm a Sucker for Your Love directly to black radio. Forget about going to white radio. Motown was so afraid that they'd see she was white and that the records wouldn't sell. I can only hear Barry going, hey, they don't show her that she's white. They released the lead single, I'm a Sucker for Your Love, which was a fiery duet with Rick directly to black stations, as we said. Programmers and listeners alike naturally assumed that Teena was a black artist because of the sheer power, cadence, and soulful depth of her vocals. I'm sure you felt that same way.
We all assumed that. Me and my friends, we all just figured she was just probably a black girl.
Most likely. Well, they sure didn't show her on the record cover.
Right.
But by the time she made her national television debut on Don Cornelius' Soul Train alongside a Rick, I'm a Sucker for Your Love was already a massive top 10 R&B hit. The audience, man, they were stunned to see a petite white woman step up to the mic and deliver that level of raw soul, man. She won that audience over. She was a fucking
All of our
badass.
jaws dropped, but you know what? She sounded so good, we didn't care.
She was such a great singer.
And for the rest of her career, we didn't care. That creative bond peaked on Rick James' 1981 Street Songs album with Fire and Desire.
A badass.
It's a classic now, yeah. Their personal and professional relationship was intense, romantic, chaotic, and deeply spiritual. That volcanic energy was permanently etched into tape during the tracking sessions for this masterpiece album.
That's right. The story of recording Fire and Desire is pure studio lore. On the day of the vocal tracking session, while Teena was suffering from a severe cold and a fever. So she reportedly stepped out of bed, wrapped in a blanket, walked into the vocal booth, drank tea with lemon, while Rick stood on the other side of the glass, directing her like a conductor. Man, they ran that track live, bouncing off each other's improvisations. Teena delivered those soaring, legendary high notes on a single take.
The spoken word breakdown near the end of the song, Max. You know, Max, Lady T, yeah, Rick. It was completely unscripted.
Sure was.
It was their actual real-time relationship play out captured on a live microphone.
Rick didn't just write hits for Teena Marie. He gave her the tools to become a master architect in her own right. He taught her how to arrange horn sections, lay down heavy bass lines, command a studio mixing console. So by her third album, I Need Your Lovin', which I love that song.
I love that song, yeah.
And her monumental 1981 release, It Must Be Magic, man, Teena was writing, arranging, and producing her own multi-platinum records independently, becoming one of the few women in R&B history to hold complete creative control over her music. Badass.
That's what, yeah, it's true badass. And even after their romantic path ended and legal disputes with Motown arose, their bond never broke.
No.
They continued to perform Fire and Desire together on stages worldwide for over 2 decades until Rick's passing in 2004.
Yeah, but I would assume that the Fire was a little lower,
and
right?
A little less desire.
And a little less desire.
Yeah.
But other than that.
Yeah, that's a testament to two artists who spoke the exact same musical language.
Oh, yes. The lesson here from modern artists across the R&B scene today is profound. Rick James didn't just write hits for Teena. He taught her how to arrange those horn sections, lay down those synth lines, command a mixing console. He empowered her to become a self-produced multi-platinum powerhouse. She was bad. As creators today, we need to mentor each other, share studio knowledge, and build lasting capability, not just chase a quick feature crowd.
Come on now, absolutely.
That's right.
So coming up in segment 3, we're looking at the album that defined an era, Street Songs. So don't go anywhere. You're digging down on Rick James with Max and Mello and the Architects of Soul, and we'll be right back.
Yep, don't go nowhere. Hey, we're back on Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, digging into the peak of Rick James' production empire, the 1981 release of Street Song.
Motown executives were pressuring Rick for a soft pop crossover record.
Oh, yeah, good luck with that.
Exactly. Right you are, Max. Instead, Rick looked back at his childhood memories on the east side of Buffalo, New York. He constructed an autobiographical cinematic concept album reflected on the raw realities of urban life, the cops, the hustlers, the ghetto pain, and the late-night party scene.
Yeah, the stories behind those individual tracks show how brilliant Rick was at arranging. On Give It To Me, Baby, Rick needed an iconic rumbling bass voice to deliver the call and response refrain on the track, Mello. So who does he tap for that? Well, he
Uncle
just
Melvin.
reaches out to Uncle Melvin. That's right, the legendary Temptations bass singer and his Uncle Melvin Franklin. And when Melvin walked into the tracking room, man, he laid down that deep, unforgettable, Give It To Me, Rick line in a single pass. Man, Rick knew immediately he had a monster opening track.
And then you have Super Freak, Max.
Super Freak.
Rick originally wrote that synth bass riff as a simple practice loop and almost threw the song away. calling the lyrics silly.
Imagine that.
Okay. But while tracking at the studio, the Temptations happened to be in the building.
Just so happened.
Okay. So then Rick invited them into the vocal booth to stack lush gospel-style backing harmonies. She's a very kinky girl. Whoa,
yeah.
all that stuff. That blend of street funk synths with Motown vocal arrangements turned it into a global phenomenon.
Yes, despite Super Freak being a multi-platinum smash, though, MTV initially refused to air the music video. And even though Super Freak was a global multi-platinum smash hit, well, MTV claimed that Rick's aesthetic didn't fit their rock format. What the fuck is that about? Well, Soul Fam, Rick launched a fierce vocal press campaign calling out the network's racial bias, which helped break down the doors for him and for Michael Jackson's Billie Jean shortly after.
That's right. And later on Ghetto Life, Rick captured an authentic street atmosphere by recording ambient street noises, children playing and police sirens.
Yeah, Ghetto Life.
Yeah, weaving them directly into the intro to create a cinematic world long before digital sampling made that a standard practice.
And that's right. And once street songs blew up, Rick proved he could build an entire multi-platinum act from scratch. Now, we have to kind of talk about this just because it's part of the story and it's important. So around 1981, right as street songs was exploding, Rick and Sly finally crossed paths in California.
According to Rick's autobiography, Glow, Max, and studio engineers who were there, their first meeting was like watching two caged tigers meeting for the first time.
Yes, circling each other.
Yeah, because both men possess massive hyper-competitive egos. However, they clicked instantly over music.
Well, yeah, naturally, Soul Fam. It was late 70s, and so they shared the late-night vices, and they began hanging out constantly in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Now, shortly after meeting, Rick and Sly locked themselves in a San Francisco recording studio for a full week, jamming on synths and guitars, talking production, and experimenting with tracks. However, that same 1981 meeting was also infamous because it was when Sly introduced Rick to freebasing cocaine. And Rick openly admitted in later years that while Sly gave him some of his greatest musical inspiration, that week with Sly was also the beginning of his own long, destructive struggle with heavy drug addiction.
And in the end, what we see and the verdict for this podcast, because with the good comes the bad.
That's right.
Sly started as the architectural blueprint on paper that inspired Rick's entire production vision. But by 1981, they became real-life peers, studio jam partners, and close friends who lived out the highest peaks and the lowest valleys. Yeah, of the funk era together.
That's right. And now that's out of the way, let's get back into it, shall we? So 1983, enter the Mary Jane Girls. Rick wanted a modern, street-smart girl group with a punk-funk edge mellow. That sounds so crazy. So before there was a group, a photo shoot, or a single outfit design, there was Joanne JoJo McDuffie. And JoJo, she was a powerhouse vocalist from Buffalo, New York, who was already working at Rick's Inner Circle. She was doing backgrounds for Stone City, and she was also singing for Teena. And when Rick decided he wanted to construct a modern street-smart girl group to rival Prince's Vanity 6, and believe me, he wanted to rival anything Prince did, he didn't hold open auditions for singers. No, he just brought JoJo in the studio first.
Bet, Max. She was Rick James's secret weapon. JoJo laid down virtually all lead vocals and stacked the overwhelming majority of the background harmonies on the tracks for their 1983 self-titled debut album and their 1985 follow-up, Only For You. While Motown thought they were getting a newly minted four-piece group, the actual recording sessions at the record plant were pure Rick James solo virtuosity.
Indeed it was, Mel. Indeed it was. Multi-instrument stacking. Rick locked himself in the studio overnight, probably with a pound of blow. He recorded the drum machine programming, played the synth bass lines using the Oberheim OBXA and the new memory Moog, tracking the rhythm guitars and arranging the horn charts. He had a long night. JoJo would step up to the mic and track the lead vocals under Rick's intense direction. Rick stacked her voice repeatedly to create the illusion of a full, lush group harmony. Sound familiar, Mello?
Yeah, it does. When the other three ladies, Candace Candy Gant, Maxine Maxie Sibley, and Anne Sherry Bailey, were assembled to complete the visual group, their main job during the initial album tracking was contributing visual chemistry and occasional group accents, while JoJo held down the heavy musical lifting. So long before the Spice Girls were assigned nicknames like Scary, Posh, or Baby, Rick engineered specific character archetypes for the Mary Jane Girls to hit every segment of the market.
That's right. He meticulously built visual and vocal archetypes for each of the members. JoJo McDuffie was the lead vocal powerhouse. Candy was the glam diva. Maxie was the leather-clad rocker. And Sherry was the pop archetype. JoJo McDuffie held down nearly all the lead vocals on those records. And on hits like All Night Long and In My House, Rick played almost every instrument himself, stacking synths, electric bass, and drum machines overnight, then bringing JoJo in the morning to lay down the vocal pass.
In My House crossed over to the Billboard Top 10 by bridging classic Motown group harmonies with early Chicago house and new wave synth textures.
It was killer. So look at what modern independent artists and upcoming soul acts can learn here, Soul Fam. Rick showed us the power of conceptual vision. Whether you're producing your own record or working with a group, having a clear vocal strategy, defined arrangements, and a distinct sonic identity is what separates a random song from an enduring brand.
We got one more main segment ahead where we cover Rick's work with The Temptations, Eddie Murphy, and his massive impact on hip-hop. So stay locked in.
That's right. You're kicking it with Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, and we're talking Rick James, bitch!
I knew you had to do it.
Had to. We'll be back. Thanks for tuning into Architects of Soul. Our music is waiting for you.
Welcome back to segment 4 of Max and Mello's Architects of Soul. And before we jump into this final stretch, if you like this content, please give a like and subscribe to our channel. And remember,
please.
There's also a video version available on our YouTube page if you feel like watching instead of just listening.
That's right. So Mello, let's talk about the ultimate payback story. By 1982, after the Temptations stepped up to lay down backing vocals for Super Freak, well, Rick wanted to return the favor. The Temptations were facing a commercial slump, but original lead singer Eddie Kendricks and legendary David Ruffin, who I guess he wasn't beating up on Dennis Edwards anymore, well, he temporarily rejoined the group for a reunion project. So Rick stepped into the producer's chair, strapped on his bass, and wrote an explosive 9-minute funk workout called Standing on the Top. Badass song. Mm-hmm. And he didn't just produce. He traded vocal lines directly with Dennis Edwards, David Ruffin, and Eddie Kendricks. The track shot into the R&B top 10, re-energizing the Temptations' career and filling arenas for their reunion tour.
And then in 1985, Eddie Murphy, the biggest comedy star on earth, wanted to prove he could sing serious R&B. So he turned to Rick James, and Rick invited Eddie out to his home studio in Buffalo, New York to write and track Party All the Time.
Which they probably did.
Mm-hmm.
So Rick didn't treat Eddie like a Hollywood movie star either. He worked him hard as a vocalist. He spent hours tweaking pitch and vocal phrasing over a heavy synth pop arrangement. And the result, well, Party All the Time actually climbed all the way to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. Pretty good for a comedy guy,
Oh,
right?
yeah. How about that? But Rick's influence took on an entirely new life in 1990 when MC Hammer took the iconic synth-bass riff from Super Freak.
Can't Touch This.
Yeah, and used it for Can't Touch This. Hammer's album sold 18 million copies, but Hammer used the sample without clearing it beforehand. You know what? Yep.
I'm fucked.
So then Rick filed a copyright lawsuit and settled out of court.
Oh, you better believe he did.
Yeah, and he received full co-writing credit, but you know he got some coins.
Oh my God, more coins. Because Rick was officially credited as a songwriter when You Can't Touch This won Best R&B Song at the 1991 Grammy Awards. Guess what? Rick won his very first Grammy Award as a writer for a rap record. Go fucking figure that. Mm-hmm. Decades later in 2022, Nicki Minaj flipped the exact same Super Freak riff on her global hit Super Freaky Girl, proving how immortal Rick's bass lines are and how much money was going into his pocket. You better believe it.
So for today's R&B and soul artists navigating the music scene today, Rick's journey teaches us crucial business lessons. Protect your intellectual property.
Damn straight.
Clear your samples.
Oh, better believe it.
And hold on to your publishing rights because business savvy matters just as much as writing a great hook.
Plus, his ability to revitalize classic royalty like the Temptations while building pop hits for Eddie Murphy actually shows that true producers know how to adapt their musical toolkit to any voice and bring out an undeniable performance.
When we return, we're wrapping up Season 2, Episode 22 with our final thoughts on the legacy of Rick James.
Yep, Soul Fam, we are down to the wire on Rick James. We're going to take a quick break and come back, put some voltage down that wire, and light y'all up, so don't go nowhere. You're listening to Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, and we'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to the final segment of Max and Mello's Architects of Soul. Today's deep dive into Rick James has been an incredible journey through music history.
That's right. Rick James was a true force of nature.
He sure was, Mel.
He proved that R&B artists could write, arrange, perform, and produce their own catalog while maintaining absolute creative control. He bridged the gap between raw street grit and polished pop songwriting, leaving behind a blueprint that still powers modern R&B, hip-hop sampling, and pop production today.
That's right, and for every modern soul singer, producer, and musician grinding in the industry today, remember that your unique story is your greatest asset. Don't let trends box you in. Learn your arrangements, stack your vocal harmonies, master your low-end lines, own your image, and protect your business behind the console.
That's how we honor the craft, keep this music vibrant, and push the entire soul music community forward into a new era.
And as always, we want to close with our final thought, our hope for all of us, our art, our craft, and our creations.
Keep that soul fire burning, protect your sound, nurture your creativity, own your voice, and remember the lessons from the giants who came before.
And yes, protect your masters and seek out wise mentors who can guide you on your journey. And until next we meet, peace and soul, y'all.